What's up, people? Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Hope you're doing well. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Seahawks offensive line because that's been something that's really been on my mind lately. And there's some good stuff, obviously. And I talked about the good stuff a bunch yesterday in my rookie slash sophomore video with what Cross and Lucas are doing. And that's certainly the upshot, but there is a downshot here. And fortunately, the downshot doesn't matter nearly as much as the upshot does. So that's good. But we need to talk about this for a second here. We need to figure out what we're going to do, if anything, and try to get a sense for where this could be going. So Brady Henderson posted this on Twitter yesterday, and I found it to be pretty interesting. Um, the rankings for the Seahawks offensive line through 3 games in ESPN's pass block win rate. So ESPN keeps their own stat on how well certain players are doing in their pass blocking. And this is, of course, different than what PFF does with their pass block scores. So I I think it's good to look at as much data as possible and then combine that with what your eyes see. So, for instance, we've seen the offensive line play in these 3 games, and we should combine that with the stats. And if what we see matches up or roughly matches up with the stats, then we're probably barking up the right tree. If these things get contradicted by the stats, then maybe we need to consider revisiting or at least try to understand why there might be that discrepancy. So let's talk about it here. Let's try to figure this out. So, like I said, the tackles are good. I'm not really going to talk about those in this video because they stand on their own. There's nothing you need to say there. Cross has a pass block win rate of just under 90%, 26th, and Abe Lucas is just behind him at 89, which is 32nd among tackles. Um, this stat keeps track of probably, I'd say, close to 70 total tackles. It's all the tackles who have played X number of snaps. I don't know what X is right now, but it basically keeps track of every offensive tackle that has played at least some so far this year. And Cross and Lucas are both above average. And given the fact that they are rookies, given the fact that they are new, this is their first 3 games, literally their first 3 games in the NFL, given the fact that they're on an offense that has some shortcomings and limitations, you got to say that's really good. PFF backs this up. Our eyes back this up. Yes, Cross has given up 3 sacks. Yes, Lucas has some penalties, but they're playing well. They're playing average to above average football, and the growth potential is huge. But I want to talk about the interior of the offensive line specifically because that's the area that isn't going so well right now. And I want to compare what ESPN says to what PFF says. And obviously, these stats are trying to capture different things. So let's start with the guard and try to get these things to make some sense. So Phil Haynes. Phil Haynes has played about a game and a half because of the Damien Lewis injury. So nominally he is your backup, but he's played about as much as Damien Lewis has so far this year. His pass block win rate is 94.5%, which is 21st among all guards. And I don't know exactly how many guards currently qualify for pass block win rate, but it's probably about 70. So Haynes is actually near the top. And I find this to be interesting because PFF paints a very different picture. PFF will tell you that he's been terrible, or, well, really bad, maybe not terrible. His pass blocking has been really bad, and his run blocking has been barely, maybe slightly above bad, but not quite average. Like high end of bad or low end of average. You guys know what I'm talking about here. Like just not good. Yeah, PFF is actually saying that Phil Haynes is one of our worst offensive linemen. Maybe the worst who has actually played significant snaps so far this year. So obviously the stats are meant to keep track of different things, but the concept behind a stat like this is trying to encapsulate how good or how bad a player is. They're trying to basically take something that is difficult to quantify and quantify it. Now, to my eyes, Phil Haynes has not played particularly well so far, but I look at a number like this and I wonder if maybe I'm being a little unfair. Maybe he actually is playing better than these guys. And the thing with Phil Haynes that I've always talked about is there is some upside there because he's relatively young and he hasn't played a lot in the NFL. So Phil Haynes, maybe there is something cooking here, and with what's going on at the other spots of our interior offensive line, maybe it's time to let that dog hunt a little bit. One thing that could be pointed out is that Phil Haynes has had a couple penalties against him so far that did not help. And I don't know about those penalties is what I'm going to say about that. Those penalties were questionable to me, so that could be a big factor. Gabe Jackson, this is a guy who has made it very clear that he doesn't have a lot left. So Gabe Jackson's down to 89.6% playing from his playing from right guard. That's the thing, okay? Right guard is traditionally the position that should be the easiest to play for an offensive lineman, right? Generally speaking, right guards have it easier, especially when it comes to pass blocking. They're more run blockers. So the fact that Gabe Jackson is below 90% and not even or right around the halfway point for all guards tells you that while the number itself is respectable, he doesn't have it. And PFF, I mean, they paint a very ugly picture of his pass blocking. Now, they give him a little bit of credit for the run blocking, but overall, this is a player who is maybe just barely better than bad and probably a little worse than average. And there's no upside here. He's already 31. He's probably not going to be here next year. So it seems to me that Gabe Jackson probably needs to get pushed out here. Now, here's the interesting part of all this. You kind of have to try to figure out how to sift through the numbers and find the actual meaning here, and it's not always easy. Damien Lewis, according to ESPN's pass block win rate, is one of the lesser guards in the league, barely top 50, 87.5%. And we know that Damien Lewis is playing left guard, which is not right guard. And right guard is the position where he played fairly well at in 2020. 2021, he played left guard, and he was maybe average, approximately, maybe a little below. And now we look at this, and we're like, okay, so what's up with that? And then you go over to PFF, and here's, like I said, this is the part you got to put your thinking caps on and try to solve. PFF thinks he's actually played pretty lackluster. They have a worse grade on him so far than they did last year, but they actually think he's been doing really well as a pass blocker, 76. It's his run blocking that has taken a big dip, which is bizarre, because I could have sworn that Damien Lewis was the run blocker. I could have sworn that Damien Lewis was being looked at as a guy who was going to be a run blocker first and a pass blocker second. We're talking about 90 snaps here at the end of the day. I don't want to put too fine of a point on it, but this is kind of weird. And more than that, how can these two stats paint two completely different pictures? My best guess would be that through his season so far, he's faced just under 60 pass block snaps. And if you go over and look at his percentage, 87.5%. So approximately total, if he's had 60 total pass block snaps, that means he's probably looking at 7 or 8 times where he lost. But those losses are not resulting in pressure. So PFF clearly doesn't seem to be punishing him for losing in pass block, because that's what this is, right? If you're winning 87.5%, then you're losing 12.5%. So interesting wrinkle. My best guess would just be that he's getting beat on plays where Gino gets the ball out quick enough to where it doesn't matter. Or maybe Gino gets sacked by somebody else. Like maybe Cross allows the sack and Lewis gets let off the hook for whatever it is he did. But kind of interesting. So trying to put all this together here, because honestly, even though pass blocking in general is more important than run blocking in the NFL, the problem with this particular team right now seems to me that the inside of our offensive line isn't really run blocking. Like that, we couldn't run the ball at all against the Niners. We did okay against the Broncos, and we did pretty well against the Falcons in terms of production. Seems to me, though, that our running backs are having to work really hard to deal with a group of interior run blockers that aren't playing at the level I was expecting. So, obviously, the easy thing to do would be Phil Haynes at left, Damien Lewis at right, put Jackson on the bench, and if Lewis is not healthy right now, because it looks like he may not be, maybe you put Jake Curhan in instead. He's proven he can be a great run blocker, and if you put Curhan out there next to Lucas, you can run behind the right side of that offensive line for days and days and days and days and get a ton of production out of it. So I'm just trying to piece all this stuff together to understand what's going on here. Obviously, I think Phil Haynes is better than what he's done so far, but through 85 offensive snaps, it's been relatively disappointing for me because last year when he played, I was actually really impressed. But at the end of the day, he is the guy with upside, and I don't see the point of playing Gabe Jackson anymore. He's the odds of him being here next year are low, and it's not like he's playing better than just anybody. He literally is just anybody right now. Center, real quick, I want to kind of highlight something that might even be more troubling after 3 games. Austin Blythe was brought in largely, I would say, because we wanted a better pass protector. We were sick of, while I don't think Posick was necessarily a bad player. I don't, and I think he's proving in Cleveland right now that he's okay. I think we wanted somebody who wouldn't get completely bullied by the Aaron Donalds of the world and would at least be able to give us some pass protection. And we just needed a 1-year stopgap. We didn't think Blythe was going to be some long-term solution here. I don't think you brought in Blythe to be a run blocker. And to my eyes, Blythe has been an abysmal run blocker through the first 3 games. So, okay. But his pass block win rate is down to 92.5%, which is near the bottom of the league for centers. How many qualifying centers are there in the NFL right now? It's less than 40. So he's well below average at the very least. Well below average. PFF, I mean, they more or less back this up. They've given him a terrible grade through 3 games. Literally worst on the line, even worse than what they gave Phil. And while his run blocking in particular has just been abysmal, which matches up with what I'm seeing, his pass block grade is okay. But in no universe, in no galaxy, is this worth the terrible run blocking, even as a 1-year stopgap. So we're kind of stuck here, right? We're kind of stuck. I mean, we had Joey Hunt in for a visit yesterday. We're probably going to take a look at Kyle Fuller at some point if this doesn't improve, but neither of those things are real solutions. So it just, the center position continues to be a real problem for this Seahawks team ever since, a lot of people would say Unger, but I would say ever since Britt left his prime, which Justin Britt did not have a very long prime, but he had like 1 year where he was really good. He had another year where he was okay, and then the party was over. But, yeah, this to me is the main thing that I'm worried about with this offense. We have a head coach that loves to run the ball up the middle. That's his thing. And we don't have an interior offensive line that can run block at all. And honestly, the pass blocking is highly suspect as well. Our best run blocker, according to PFF, from the interior of our offensive line is Gabe Jackson, who is still below 60. So I'm just trying to piece all this stuff together and understand what we need to do. But the bottom line, I think, is we're going to be looking at interior offensive linemen a lot this offseason. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Let me know what you guys think.